Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. It's good to have you with us here on this Tuesday evening, January 27th. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Hope you're all having a good start to the work or school week, whatever it may be for you. We certainly appreciate you stopping by here with us on a late night Falcon 9 flight from the Cape. On board is a national security payload being launched on behalf of the United States Space Force. This is the ninth in the first 10 series of third generation GPS satellites that will head to a medium Earth orbit. Deployment from the Falcon 9 rocket is scheduled for about an hour and a half post liftoff. Time currently T minus 58 minutes, 6 seconds, and counting to the planned departure from Space Launch Complex 40 here at the Cape. As we're getting rolling here, want to thank the nearly 400 of you who are watching along with us live today. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. As we're getting going as well, I want to thank our mods for being here tonight, helping us in the chat. Looks like it might actually be Jeff Hansen holding it down solo. But if you do see any of the other mods cruise on in throughout the course of the coverage, be sure to give them a big old Spaceflight Now hello. You can up the mods' jobs. Be that much easier just by following our live chat rules. We ask that you post your message in English so that the mods can respond as appropriate. Also, that you hold off from delving into topics of overt politics or religion. Emojis are perfectly fine. We just ask that you don't create a huge block of them so it takes up a large percentage of the chat. And last but certainly not least, we ask that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated, and we'll all get along swimmingly. We're also joined this evening by one of our channel members, Cumulus Granatus, who's able to help answer folks' questions in the chat as we go throughout the coverage. Speaking of our channel member community, this and every other live launch opportunity are made possible in no small part thanks to our wonderful channel members. So big thanks to folks like Species, Tony Lang, Sulfur for Lunch, That Opal Guy, Sir Liv Eris, Michael Cisneros, and many, many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and, of course, the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of our broadcast today. We've got our photographers out and about as well. As we speak, our Adam Bernstein is making his way over Cape Side to get a vantage point from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station of this launch. John Pisani's over here holding it down at the KSC press site. Photographer Michael Kane is off for this launch, but if you're not already following the fellows on X, you can find them at their handles here on your screen. John is at John Pisani Photo, Adam is at A Burn NYC, Michael at MD Kane Jr. While you're there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. We are also on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook for those of you who are not on X. We'll also be joined a little bit later in our coverage by our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, as well as Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions. As we continue on with the count, want to welcome in a new channel member, Tommy Boy 14, joining us with membership at the mission specialist level. Appreciate that, Tommy. Thanks for joining us. And thanks to another channel member, Mrs. Ed3, for being a member with us for now 20 months at the pad leader level. Who says, I hope you're warm in Florida. And I will say, ish is about the status of things. Certainly, many other parts of the United States are being hit much harder with the cold and the impacts from this winter storm moving its way across the country. Things are certainly cold by Florida standards, but not nearly so much so as our friends a little bit further north. So, certainly thinking about them tonight, even as it's currently about 45 degrees at the Cape with a feels like temperature of 37. So it is definitely cold. I also want to thank Michael Cisneros, one of our channel members, for a $5 super chat. Thank you for the support tonight, Michael. Of course, as we're tracking the countdown of this Falcon 9 rocket, which is set to depart in a little more than 52 minutes as things currently stand, we are also continuing to track things on NASA's Artemis 2 mission, which is marching ever closer to the first crewed flight of the Space Launch System rocket and the Orion spacecraft. You're looking live right now out at Launch Complex 39B, where you can see the 322-foot tall rocket stack, Orion up top, supported by the core stage. It's the orange center of the vehicle, and of course, the solid rocket boosters on either side of the core stage, which will provide about 75% of thrust at liftoff. Coming up this week is the critical tanking test, which is referred to as the wet dress rehearsal. Unlike the countdown demonstration test, or the CDDT, which was performed inside the vehicle assembly building, the wet dress rehearsal will not involve the astronauts who are currently in quarantine at the Johnson Space Center. Rather, this is a tanking test and a run through of the full countdown timeline with the rest of the flight team as they get an understanding of how the rocket will perform on the day of launch. They will fuel up both the core stage liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen tanks, as well as the LH2 and LOX tanks on the SLS rocket's upper stage, called the interim cryogenic propulsion, or ICPS stage. The countdown timeline has things beginning at about L minus 49 hours away from the target T0 at the end of the test, which will come up on Saturday evening. So, as things are currently scheduled, teams will be called to stations on Thursday evening. Or on Thursday. Again, about 49-ish hours ahead of the T0 time. They'll take things down to about a minute and a half before the marked T0, and then cycle back a couple of times before they conclude the test. So things should wrap up somewhere between 9 p.m. on Saturday night and 1 a.m. Sunday morning. And again, this will run through the full Artemis 2 countdown timeline to make sure that teams are prepared for the tanking of the vehicle on launch day and to get data from the hardware at the pad in the launch environment now that they've gone through a series of tests and checkouts. And if it were the case that they come across something that is problematic enough that they are unable to address it at the pad, NASA has set expectations that a rollback to the VAB could be in the future for this launch vehicle. And NASA has also said that they will not be setting a firm or a target launch date specifically until after the wet dress rehearsal has concluded. So probably Sunday or Monday would be the absolute earliest that a firm launch date might be announced. But again, that will be dependent on the data received from the wet dress rehearsal and how that's interpreted. And of course, if a rollback to the VAB is warranted, that would certainly put things back a little bit, depending on the nature of the issue, if there were to be one like that that came up. For those who may not specifically remember, there were 4 wet dress rehearsals for the Artemis 1 mission, and a couple of rollbacks did occur. One was related to the WDRs, the other was in response to Hurricane Ian. Of course, Spaceflight Now will have live coverage of the WDR. Granted, we're not going to have continuous commentary coverage for the full 49 hours, but you can always head over to our 24/7 live stream, Artemis Live, if you want to check in with the progress at the pad. And we'll have some commentary dipping into the start of the WDR, as well as some of the milestones on the day that tanking is set to begin, which of course is coming up on Saturday as things are currently scheduled. And then we'll have dedicated coverage with commentary in its own specific live stream on Saturday. And just to set expectations about what that will entail, unlike launch day, there will not be audio coming from firing room 1, and NASA is not expected to be providing any kind of audio from a public affairs officer in a technical capacity. So information flowing from the wet dress will be fairly limited during this important tanking test. We'll, of course, give you as many updates as we're able, but we'll also be restricted with how much information we're able to get. But we'll pass along the best to you as we get it. One last Artemis note before we fully turn our attention back to the Falcon 9. Today happens to be the 50th birthday for Canadian and mission specialist Jeremy Hansen. So a happy birthday to him. We hope him and the rest of the crew are doing well in quarantine, and we look forward to welcoming them back here to Florida ahead of launch. Time now, T minus 44 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. You're looking at the Falcon 9 rocket from our Adam Bernstein's vantage point over Cape Side. Kind of hard to see because this is a level angle with the pad, but one of the newest additions to Space Launch Complex 40, of course, is the landing zone adjacent to the launch pad. SpaceX had a lease over at landing zones 1 and 2 at Space Launch Complex 13. That ended on December 31st, and the rule moving forward is companies who want to have a booster return for a landing on land need to do so at a landing site adjacent to their launch pad. So at some point this year, we'll see SpaceX bring his or bring their launch or landing zone at Space Launch Complex 40 into play. Unclear if it will be called LZ-40 or if SpaceX will reclaim the LZ-1 or 2 moniker for this particular landing site. We'll have to wait and see. Speaking of waiting and seeing, we're just a few minutes away from when SpaceX is set to start fueling its Falcon 9 rocket there at the pad. So with the fueling about to get underway, if all is still on track, let's take a beat to talk about the countdown timeline. The milestones ahead for SpaceX ahead of a good flight of their workhorse launch vehicle. Of course, things will kick off, generally speaking, around T-minus 38 minutes. That's when SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load. T-minus 35 minutes is when prop load will begin if the go-ahead is given. Fueling starts with the loading of RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene, on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen will begin to flow on board the rocket's first stage. About half an hour before liftoff, cryogenic helium is loaded onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. Same will be true on the second stage about a few minutes after that. The helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. At about T-minus 23 minutes, that's when second stage RP-1 loading should wrap up. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is the start of the strong back chill down. At this point, SpaceX will condition the feed lines such that they can start to flow liquid oxygen aboard the rocket's upper stage. We'll see this visually manifest as the so-called big vent happening here at Pad 40 at roughly T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. The 4-minute vent will wrap up and set the stage for the LOX to flow at T-minus 16 minutes. 7 minutes before takeoff, that's when SpaceX flows a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps for the 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the booster. And that will help to protect those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. 6 minutes before takeoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the retraction of the strong back away from the rocket. First, the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, it will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff. Then at that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes before takeoff, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full. Same will be true on the second stage, roughly a minute after that, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. And the final 60 seconds before takeoff, as the rocket is entering into its automated startup sequence, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will then give their go for launch determination, T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, The command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 departure. Currently targeting that liftoff at 11:38 p.m. Eastern, 04:38 UTC for our friends around the world. Just a little under 39 minutes from now. Time now T minus 36 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. Assuming that SpaceX has, in fact, given the go ahead for the start of fueling, tanking of the rocket is set to begin in now less than a minute and a half. The mission today will carry the ninth GPS 3 or third generation GPS satellite into a medium Earth orbit. Before the satellite was fully encapsulated into the Falcon 9 payload fairings that you're seeing live on your screen. SpaceX captured some photos of the satellite, as you can see in this picture here, in front of one of the payload fairings. Here's another image shared by Lockheed Martin, captured by SpaceX, with a couple of the payload fairings surrounding this GPS satellite. Originally, this particular GPS satellite was set to fly on a United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket, but the U.S. Space Force made the decision to switch it to a Falcon 9 in order to get this capability into orbit sooner. These later GPS 3 satellites are equipped with what's referred to as M-code software, which makes them more resilient and resistant to things like jamming and spoofing. We'll talk more about GPS as we get further into the count, but as you can see, we're just about 30 seconds into the point at which SpaceX should be fueling its Falcon 9 rocket at the pad. in the next few minutes, we should start to see some good visible signs of fueling. SpaceX may also announce the start of fueling as well, given that this is a customer mission. Barring that, though, we will be watching for the signs of fueling by looking out for a frost line to form near the Falcon 9's first stage, the base of that part of the rocket. From this vantage point, looking from Adam's camera at the Cape side, we should see just above where you see the strong back start to taper in a little bit of vapor in that area where the frost line forms as well. And that's a good visual indication that the super cold densified liquid oxygen is beginning to build up in the LOX tank on the booster. And we do have a new T0. Time resetting. New T0 is 11:53:16. We are resetting the countdown clock. Stand by. Again, for those just joining us, SpaceX did set a new T0 of 11:53 p.m. Eastern, 04:53 UTC. There was a 15-minute window set for tonight's launch, so this will put them right at the end of that window. Again, with the T0 adjustment, SpaceX is now back to T minus 40 minutes, 42 seconds, and counting. So about 2.5 minutes away from the point at which they will nominally make the call on the start of prop load tonight. If SpaceX is unable to launch this mission this evening, there is another backup opportunity tomorrow. That's Wednesday, January 28th at 11:34 p.m. Eastern, 04:34 UTC for those joining around the world. As we await the start of fueling for the Falcon 9 rocket, take the opportunity to share some celestial views from our friend Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions, taking a look up at the moon, the target for the upcoming Artemis 2 mission, which will not be entering into lunar orbit, but rather making a flyby around the moon, coming back to Earth. As you may have been able to hear over the loudspeaker, a wind advisory is now currently in effect. It's calling for 18 knot steady state winds for all parts of the Kennedy Space Center. One of the more remarkable parts of the Artemis 2 mission is their journey around the far side of the moon, depending on the lighting on the day that they make this part of the roughly 10-day trek. They give them the opportunity to see parts of the moon that human eyes have never been able to see illuminated in sunlight. And so part of their mission objectives will be to gather a whole bunch of observational data about what kind of color and details that they're able to pick up from that flyby. They'll have a roughly 45-minute period of time where they are behind the moon and unable to directly communicate with Earth. In the future, NASA is hoping to eliminate that type of a blackout with further missions that will create additional communications relay satellite opportunities in lunar orbit that can allow future long duration missions on the moon's south pole to have continuous communications with mission controllers and flight directors back on Earth. Time now currently T minus 36 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Just seeing word from SpaceX that they are preparing to step into propellant load. Teams say that prop load is about to begin. Weather is favorable for tonight's launch of the GPS 3-9 mission for the U.S. Space Force. The prop load set to start now in just a little more than 30 seconds. T minus 35 minutes and counting. Again, at this point, with the word from SpaceX, means that the rocket fueling process is now beginning. Again, this will start with a loading of RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages, and liquid oxygen now flowing on board the rocket's booster. as we continue to watch the progress of this Falcon 9 rocket towards liftoff, carrying the latest GPS satellite into medium Earth orbit. Of course, today is January 27th, a solemn day in the history of human spaceflight. This day back in 1967 when a tragic fire at Launch Complex 34 led to the loss of NASA astronauts Ed White, Gus Grissom, and Roger Chaffee. And of course, tomorrow is also the 40th anniversary of the Challenger disaster. And with the Artemis 2 mission looming in potentially the coming weeks or the next few months, a lot of focus is being put on the safety of the crew and making sure that they will have safe passage when they do launch from LC-39B for their 10-day flight around the moon and back. Bringing things back to tonight's uncrewed launch of this Falcon 9 rocket. If you take a look at the strong back near where the strong back structure starts to taper in, you can see some wisps of vapor kind of peeking through the truss structure. As SpaceX mentioned, fueling was expected to begin at T minus 35 minutes, and that's a good visual confirmation that this is, in fact, the case. Just under half an hour remaining on the clock here. Want to thank the more than 2,200 of you who are watching along with us live tonight. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer of the satellite flying tonight, the GPS-3 space vehicle number 9, has a tradition of naming these GPS satellites after famous explorers. This particular satellite tonight happens to be named for Colonel Ellison Onizuka, the U.S. Air Force test pilot and NASA astronaut who was part of the STS-51L mission Challenger, shuttle Challenger, that unfortunately was lost 40 years ago tomorrow. He was also part of the successful flight of Shuttle Discovery on STS-51C. The booster that SpaceX is using to fly this mission in just about 26 minutes will be making its 5th trip to space and back. It is Falcon 9 first stage booster tail number 1096 in the SpaceX fleet. A fairly short booster history, which we'll uh, revisit now. It first began flying in the summer of 2025 on July 16th when it launched the KF-01 mission, or Kuiper Falcon 1. This is the first of 3 flights that Amazon booked with SpaceX and its Falcon 9 rockets to launch what at the time were called Project Kuiper, now called Amazon Leo satellites, to their low Earth orbit constellation. 24 satellites were on board this particular flight. It was followed up by a rideshare mission coordinated by NASA, the launch of the IMAP spacecraft, the Interstellar Mapping and Acceleration Probe, alongside the Carruthers Observatory and SWIFO L1. And actually, fun fact about the SWIFO L1, earlier today, NOAA announced that it actually reached its final destination about 1,000,000 miles from Earth at a fixed point in space called Lagrange Point 1. And now that it has arrived at its operating site, as we see with the GOES satellites, when they launch with a number, then they get a new name once they arrive and enter into service. In the case of SWIFO L1, it now has the new name of Solar 1. Still being configured before it fully enters into service, which is expected sometime in the spring of this year. You can go back and watch some of our previous reporting on the run-up to the launch of this trio to learn more about SWIFO L1 or the other 2 that flew aboard this booster. After that, we saw the launch of the Starlink 6-87 mission on November 11th, Followed up by a national security flight for this booster, the NROL 77 mission for the National Reconnaissance Office here in the United States. And of course, coming up here in just under 23 minutes will be the launch of the GPS 3-9 flight. And that date corresponds with the launch time in UTC, as do all of the others above here. Here's the turnaround time for the booster in between these flights. So this won't be its fastest turnaround. That'll be the 28-day pocket of time between the Starlink and the NRO mission. Tonight's launch will be SpaceX's 593rd launch of a Falcon 9 rocket, the 11th so far this year. T-minus 21 minutes, 14 seconds, and counting. We're coming up to the start of the big vent here at the pad, which is when SpaceX will thermally condition the feed lines prior to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. The visual cue for this is the big vent coming up here in less than 30 seconds. T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds is when that should begin. And there's the start of the big vent. And again, this will last roughly 4 minutes in total before LOX starts to flow on the upper stage. With the big vent wrapped up, SpaceX will now turn to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. That's set to begin in about 15 seconds. Time now, T minus 13 minutes, 9 seconds, and counting. Shortly, we should be getting pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket as teams prepare to fly this vehicle in support of the GPS constellation. Before we see that, though, let's take a moment to talk about where this Falcon 9 rocket's going to be flying once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory here. After liftoff at 11:53 p.m. Eastern, 04:53 UTC, the Falcon 9 rocket will fly on a northeasterly trajectory away from Space Launch Complex 40. Following stage separation, the first stage booster is set to land on the drone ship called A Shortfall of Gravitas. Here's some drone video that SpaceX founder Elon Musk shared of A Shortfall of Gravitas from back in 2021 to give you a sense of scale of the drone ship and what it will look like that this particular booster is going to be aiming towards. Landing on this particular vessel is expected roughly 8.5 minutes after liftoff. If all goes well, this will be the 141st good landing on this particular vessel and SpaceX's 564th booster landing to date. In addition to recovering the first stage booster, SpaceX also wants to get those payload fairings back. Once they're down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, they'll be brought aboard a SpaceX recovery vessel like the one you see here on your screen. They will then be brought back through Port Canaveral off to the Hangar X site for refurbishment and turned around for future missions. Before we get our pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket, just want to give you a quick glimpse of what the GPS satellite looks like in its on orbit configuration. You see this render here of one of those satellites. Again, this is set to be the penultimate GPS 3 satellite to launch before the next generation of GPS 3Fs begin to fly. Here's the mission patch for tonight's flight as designed by SpaceX. You're looking now at the pad level views, the Falcon 9 rocket as provided by SpaceX. Currently T minus 8.5 minutes before liftoff. Coming up in about a minute and a half, SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect the 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the booster from thermal shock and damage at startup. SpaceX commentator noting the turnaround from when SpaceX was awarded the contract to when they got this rocket on the pad with the payload was just 41 days, which is remarkably fast, especially for national security payload. This is the third GPS mission that is being launched in an accelerated format, having switched from a Vulcan rocket to a Falcon 9. Using SpaceX's on-screen graphics, let's go ahead and talk about the parts of the Falcon 9 rocket. Starting from the top, the payload fairings currently encapsulating the GPS satellite are made up of a carbon composite material and stand 13.1 meters or 43 feet in height, and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. First stage RP-1 tank is now full. Just beneath the payload fairing is the second stage, which is powered by a single modified Merlin engine called an MVAC engine, producing more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, set to be fired twice before deploying the GPS satellite. The Falcon 9 first stage, again, is B1096 in the Falcon 9 fleet. Powered by those 9 Merlin engines, produces 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. In between the first and second stages, of course, is the inner stage, a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. A little hard to see the hypersonic grid fins from this vantage point, but those are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the rocket as it comes back to the atmosphere, and in tonight's case, targets a touchdown on the drone ship, A Shortfall of Gravitas. Coming up on 5 minutes before flight tonight, in a little more than 30 seconds, we'll see the clamp arms start to open up. And then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. With just a few minutes remaining on the clock, I want to thank a few more folks for your support tonight. You're seeing the clamp arms opening up beneath the payload fairings there. I want to welcome in new channel members, Charlie Parker, Mark Trott, and Greg Smith, all joining with membership at the pad leader level. Also want to thank Master Dad Bain for being a member with us for 6 months. And City Guard has been a member with us now for 29 months at the mission specialist level. Thanks for your ongoing support. You're seeing the transporter erector now reclining back away from the Falcon 9 rocket. And City Guard says, I'm looking forward to the V3 Starship that's hopefully launching in the next couple of months. Yeah, the latest on that from SpaceX founder Elon Musk was his estimate was that there would be the next flight of Starship in 6 weeks, which would put it around the early part of March. So we'll certainly wait to see how things materialize down at Starbase, and if it looks like Flight 12 is shaping up for that early March timeframe. We're just under 3 minutes on the clock at this point. First stage LOX load has wrapped up. Second stage LOX load is set to conclude at around the T-minus 2-minute mark. SpaceX confirms that things are still progressing towards a good liftoff in just about 2 minutes, and no issues are being worked.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And with that call, the Falcon 9 rocket is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Coming up next will be the release of the remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines there at the pad. You can actually see that additional venting right now.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Exciting.
And with that call, we should be hearing the SpaceX launch director confirming that they are, in fact, go for launch in the next few seconds.
Mission directors, go for launch.
And there you heard it,
And
the
with that
LD is
good
go
call,
for tonight's mission. So let's sit back
we're
and
just a little
watch
more
as
than
Falcon 9
30
takes the
seconds away
GPS
from
39
seeing the
satellite to
Falcon 9
space.
take off with the GPS 3
T minus 30 seconds.
number 9 satellite. "15 seconds.
T minus 15 seconds.
And here we go. In 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the GPS 39 mission. The Falcon 9 rocket has cleared the tower. Falcon 9 rocket traveling faster than the speed of sound now. Approaching max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Now passing through max Q, throttling back up on those engines, coming up to the Merlin vacuum chill. SpaceX will thermally condition the upper stage engine before the start of its first burn. Confirmation of MVAC chill. There are a few events coming up next in rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 29 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation, and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. The payload fairings are set to jettison around 3.5 minutes into flight. A little more than 2 minutes into this mission so far, less than 20 seconds until MECO. Here you see MECO. Stage separation. Second stage engine start. You have good visuals on your screen, good telemetry coming down. In about 30 seconds will be payload fairing separation. The fairings will splash down on the waters of the Atlantic Ocean a little bit further downrange from where the booster lands on the drone ship, A Shortfall of Gravitas. A nice view of Florida off the tip of the hypersonic grid fin in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Fairing sep coming up. There go the fairings.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there you have it, confirmation of fairing separation and a beautiful view of the GPS 39 satellite. Now,
coming up on 4 minutes into flight right now, the next milestone ahead for SpaceX will be the start of the 3-engine entry burn, which will help to slow the vehicle down quite considerably. And entry burn is coming up in less than 2 minutes. Some really nice views of the Falcon 9's upper stage from our tracking cameras on the ground. And good onboard camera views as well tonight. SpaceX is just about 1 minute away from the start of the entry burn. Teams confirm that both the first and second stages are still on nominal trajectories. Good news at this point in flight. Coming up to the start of the entry burn here. Let's listen in.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
And nice views of the entry burn as captured by our team on the ground. Well done. This entry burn lasts less than 30 seconds in duration.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
With the conclusion of the entry burn, coming up next will be the single engine landing burn, which will take the booster down to a soft landing, if all goes well, on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas. A little more than 7 minutes into flight. Still got eyes on the rocket's upper stage from our tracker here at the press site. Second stage engine cutoff is expected a little bit past the 8-minute point in flight. That'll be followed about 5 or so seconds afterwards by the start of the landing burn.
MVAC shutdown. Stage 1 landing burn.
And there we heard confirmation of MVAC shutdown of the second stage engine on the right hand side of your screen, and landing burn startup of the booster.
Nominal orbit insertion. Landing lift deployed. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And good views, good confirmation of a touchdown of B-1096. That wraps up its 5th trip to space and back. upper stage has entered into its nominal coasting orbit. At this point in the mission, it will remain in this coast phase until T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 30 seconds. There will be a burn of the upper stage engine that lasts less than a minute. Then the GPS satellite is set to be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 19 seconds post liftoff. While we're in this coast phase, we're getting our launch replays ready for you so we can show you a roundup of the various views that we had at liftoff. Right now, seeing some nice toggling back and forth between a view of the GPS satellite, the GPS 3 space vehicle number 9, and the Merlin vacuum engine. Right now, quiet as it's continuing on in its coast phase. As those replays are ready, I want to thank a few folks for their support of our coverage so far. Our thanks to channel member Mitchell Wilbur with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Mitchell, for supporting us at that level. Mitchell says, fine job as usual, Will and the crew. Very clear and cool night. Should be a good show. Thanks to everyone involved. And yes, the cold doesn't necessarily make things terribly comfortable outside, but it does make for some fairly nice views for tracking. Jim Edgar with a also very generous $50 super chat. Thank you so much, Jim. Jim says, Lisa Bean, Jim Edgar, the cats, Kip, Lola, and Miko watching from Snoqualmie up in Washington. Go Falcon 9. And Eric also writes in with a good bit of generosity with a $20 super chat. He says, yes, great job, everyone. After tonight's flight wraps up, the next mission for SpaceX is coming up on January 29th. That'll be a launch out of Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. 25 Starlink satellites set to fly to low Earth orbit on the Starlink 17-19 mission. So that'll be another batch of satellites heading to a polar low Earth orbit. So flying on a southwest trajectory upon leaving Space Launch Complex 4 East out there at Vandenberg. And again, also on the 29th, that is when the little more than 49-hour countdown is set to begin for the start of the all-important wet dress rehearsal tanking test for SpaceX and for NASA. For NASA and its Space Launch System rocket. And again, we're just working to get those replays ready for you. We'll have them momentarily to share as we're continuing on in this coast phase for the Falcon 9 rocket tonight. Again, the next big milestone on this mission is coming up at T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 30 seconds for the second and final pre-deployment burn of the upper stage engine, with the GPS satellite set to be released about an hour and a half post liftoff. You can see live views right now on the right-hand side of your screen of the SLS rocket and Orion spacecraft up top. So for a brief window of time today, there were two Lockheed Martin built payloads standing on the launch pads here at the Cape with the Lockheed Martin built Orion spacecraft at Launch Complex 39B, and of course the Lockheed Martin built GPS 3 Space Vehicle number 9 satellite at Slick 40, now well on its way to being delivered to a medium Earth orbit. You could see with the tracking map there on the left-hand side of your screen, the Falcon 9 upper stage currently cruising up near the polar region. About to make its way past the UK and Ireland. Again, we're just standing by for our launch replays to be ready, and then we'll bring those into the broadcast while we're in this coast phase for the Falcon 9 rocket's upper stage. As NASA and teams prepare for the wet dress rehearsal. Things, of course, are continuing to move and evolve out at Launch Complex 39B in preparation for the final stages of this pre-launch campaign. In fact, earlier today we saw the side flame deflectors get shifted into place there, which you could see just beneath the uh, base of the mobile launcher. Those were moved starting at around 8 a.m. this morning. And of course, as we noted in a Twitter thread, teams also loaded hydrazine into the aft skirt section of the solid rocket boosters. Want to go back and check out that Twitter thread explaining that. We've got that up on our X account right now. And I know for folks out in the audience who are hoping to get some firmer information so that they can plan their launch viewing experience for the Artemis 2 mission, believe you me, we also wish we had firm information on exactly when this rocket is going to launch. But of course, plans won't be really firmed up by NASA until after the conclusion of the wet dress rehearsal and teams have had a chance to evaluate the data from that all important tanking test. Of course, the earliest launch opportunity for the Artemis 2 mission is February 6th, but that would, of course, require a very smooth WDR to be performed and for there to be no notable hiccups. And of course, the weather has to cooperate for uh, any upcoming launch date as well. So lots of things to factor in here in addition to the health of the rocket and a good test of the systems that will be exercised as part of the tanking operation. Some nice sunlight here on the GPS satellite and the Falcon 9 upper stage as the coast phase of this mission continues on. Got about 40 minutes remaining in this coast until the upper stage engine will spring back to life with a burn lasting less than a minute in duration. just about 25 minutes into the flight so far. At the moment, the Falcon 9 upper stage looks like it's just passing over the tip of Ukraine, heading towards a pass over the Black Sea. And we do have those replays ready for you. We'll start things with the fixed view here at the press site. Yeah, onto the wide view next. Onto the turn basin next. on to Pete's South Tracker next. We're going to pause from our replays. Pausing from our replays here for just a moment to check something on the back end of things. We'll come back to this in just a second here. Alrighty, folks, going back to our launch replays here for a moment, resuming with the tight tracker from Pete Karstens. On to the Cape Tracker next from Chuck and Jen Briggs of C&J Images. Onto the press site tracker next. And wrapping things up with the tracker on Loop Road from Adam. Time now T plus 48 minutes, 42 seconds, and counting into the mission so far. Again, coming up next for SpaceX, once it comes out of this coast phase, will be a burn of the upper stage engine lasting less than a minute in duration. We've got a little bit of time on our hands between now and then, so we're going to go ahead and play you out with some easy listening, some nice jams to mellow out in these overnight hours as we coast along until the coast phase wraps up. You're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the GPS 39 mission for the U.S. Space Force, sending the next GPS guidance satellite into medium Earth orbit.
It's not a game, it's a rich thing.
And a good burn there of the upper stage engine. At this point, the Falcon 9's upper stage will continue on in another coast phase. At this point, the upper stage will continue to coast on until T plus 1 hour, 29 minutes, 19 seconds post liftoff, when the GPS 3 Space Vehicle number 9 satellite is set to separate from the Falcon 9's upper stage, which will, of course, wrap up today's mission. Good view of that satellite there, getting ready to depart in about 25 minutes. We'll go ahead and bring the cruising tunes back until then. For now, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the GPS 3-9 mission on behalf of the United States Space Force.
game. It's a rich thing.
Time now T plus 1 hour, 27 minutes, 42 seconds and counting in real time. We're coming up to the deployment of the GPS satellite here in less than 2 minutes. At the moment, you're continuing to watch the tail end of the coast phase for the Falcon 9 upper stage. As we're coming up to the deployment of this GPS satellite, let's go ahead and listen in for these final moments before it is released.
Now, as a reminder, tonight's payload is GPS-39. The GPS-3 SV-09 satellite is specially named in honor of Colonel Ellison Onizuka. Onizuka was a flight test engineer in the U.S. Air Force and flew on Space Shuttle Discovery, STS-51C, in 1985. Tragically, 1 year later, he served as mission specialist for STS-51L on Space Shuttle Challenger, which broke up 73 seconds into flight. Now, after tonight's mission, 9 of the 10 GPS-3 satellites will have been launched, with Falcon 9 launching all but one of them. And we should be hearing that call out for payload deployment in just a couple moments.
Payload deploy confirmed.
And there you
And with one payload going out the proverbial door, another payload is marching towards the launch pad here at the Kennedy Space Center. You can see payload fairings being transported in front of the vehicle assembly building in a police convoy, making their way out to Space Launch Complex 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This will likely be the next batch of Starlink satellites that are set to fly from Cape Canaveral. This would be the batch of 29 set to fly on the Starlink 6-101 mission. Currently targeting launch in just a couple of days. And with one final view of the GPS satellites and the payload fairings now going out of view, let's go ahead and kick it on over to our mission stats as they currently stand. With a good liftoff and landing of the first stage booster that got this mission rolling. That marked the 5th flight of the booster with the tail number 1096 in the SpaceX fleet. This was SpaceX's 593rd Falcon 9 rocket launch to date, the 11th of the year so far. This was the company's 527th Falcon booster reflight, with a launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 164th launch within the last 365 days, the 304th from Pad 40 for SpaceX, and the 359th overall orbital launch from this site. Here's a look at the SpaceX bar chart comparing Falcon launches from this year to years past. Moving on, here's where things stand from the Cape orbital launch bar chart. With some recovery stats next, this was the 140th good landing on the drone ship, A Shortfall of Gravitas. That marked SpaceX's 462nd drone ship landing, the 564th booster landing, and the 565th overall landing of an orbital class rocket, including Blue Origin's Never Tell Me the Odds. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 6th orbital flight from Florida, the 11th from U.S. soil, the 12th from a U.S. rocket company, including one Electron rocket launch so far, and the 20th orbital launch attempt around the world. There have been 3 orbital failures so far this year. Here's where the pie chart currently stands. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up with our coverage of the GPS 3-9 mission. As we leave you with some parting views of the SLS rocket at Pad 39B, I want to thank the moderators who've been popping in throughout the course of the coverage. We had Jeff Hansen at the opening of things. We also were joined during the coverage by Astro Joe and Aussie Space Girl. Appreciate all of you for your help tonight. Thanks as well to one of our channel members, Cumulus Granatus, for answering folks' questions in the chat. Big thanks to our photographers, Adam Bernstein and John Pisani, for some stellar tracking work. Thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. Thanks as well to our friends Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions and Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images for assisting with tracking. Most importantly, though, thanks to you forever you've been watching. We certainly appreciate your time and attention and look forward to welcoming you back here with us when next we have a launch to cover. As a reminder, we've got not launch coverage, but dedicated coverage of the wet dress rehearsal tanking test coming up this Saturday. And that'll have its own dedicated stream, but we'll have some light commentary over on our 24/7 Artemis live stream called simply Artemis Live. That'll be in the run-up to that mission. There are those payload fairings that we saw earlier, making a cameo appearance here in our view of the SLS rocket. Those fairing halves heading over to Space Launch Complex 40 ahead of the next Starlink mission. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. Until then, bye-bye.